hold it over your head, like this.
We interrupt this program to bring you...
All right, everybody, my name is Kevin.
I'm John.
And I'm Adam.
And I'm Julie.
And we are the Real Movie Guys. Ladies and gentlemen, it's May, so it's real anime. Real Anime is a special event where we review all your favorite anime movies. This month, we're taking a special look at some of the special features from Studio Ghibli. Today's episode, we're going to review My Neighbor Totoro. When two girls move to the country to be near their ailing mother, they have adventures with the wondrous forest spirits who live nearby. Okay, guys, I know everybody's really excited for this. Maybe minus John, but we're going to talk to you in a little bit. But I've been really excited to talk about Ghibli. We haven't covered anything like this on the channel yet. You know, we've talked about anime. Recently, we did Chainsaw Man, which is like your typical action shonen anime. But I think Studio Ghibli is maybe, I would argue, the most accessible anime to like the masses. Would you guys maybe agree with that? Like, this is the, if you were going to be maybe like kind of get a gateway into anime, this would be where you would start. So starting off, I think one of the most iconic movies and one of the earliest movies from Studio Ghibli is My Neighbor Totoro. The iconic Totoro is like the symbol of Studio Ghibli. He's very closely assimilated with it. Watching it again, guys, I have to tell you, I still really enjoy this movie. There's a lot of really great things going for it. This came out in 1988. I think it barely shows its age at times. I think it's still a phenomenally animated movie with a really fun and maybe non-traditional story that I think we've gotten, you know, compared to more recent animated movies and even movies around that time. So I just want to go around real quick and talk to you guys, see what your early thoughts were. Adam, let's start with you. What'd you think of this? It's been a while since you watched Totoro, or?
It's been a bit, yeah.
Okay.
But this is like my fifth time seeing this movie, honestly. But I just love this movie. And it really does still hold up. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there is really something special about Totoro, but of course we're going to go into that. Julie, I know this is probably maybe your second time watching it. I know I'm the first one that showed you this movie when we watched it together all those years ago, many moons ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say like second, maybe third time. And I feel like, I mean, it's been so long since I've last seen it, but rewatching it again, I find myself loving it even more than the first time. There's so much, I just love the spirit of this movie, the childlike wonder. I know we're going to go more into it, but it really is just such a wonderful movie, and it just kind of makes you feel really happy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. I think the atmosphere, just what's kind of incorporated in this film. Again, something we're definitely going to talk about. All right, John, you're the one I've been waiting on. So for those who don't know at home and who haven't been keeping up with the Real Movie Guys, John hates anime. Everything anime I've ever shown him, it just has not gone over well. It could be my fault. I think I've given him some things probably I should have, scaled back a little bit on. But I think if anything, I think this might be, these might be the movies to do it. So this is the opinion I'm looking for. John, talk to me, man. What's going on? What did you think?
Honestly, it's a very weird movie. It started off so... Even like the characters in this movie, I was just like, all right. It was not what I was thinking. And
not what you're thinking in a good way?
Very different than I thought.
Yeah, in a good way? Bad way?
It was better than I thought it was going to be.
Okay. So
like from the...
Yeah.
Even from like the main characters, I thought the storytelling was pretty good throughout the whole movie.
Okay. I agree with you. I think, if anything, I would say maybe the story in this movie it takes kind of a backseat to kind of the environmental storytelling that's going on in this. The stories are very simple, in a good way, though. I think it's really easy for the target audience, which is children for this movie. There's going to be a couple of them that we're going to talk about that might be questionable as who the audience is. But this one's definitely, more targeted at children. But I think what Miyazaki was really going for in this movie, and I think what stands out maybe more so than some of our traditional American films, is this is just a very like peaceful and tranquil movie. There's really not much going on. Would anyone agree with that argument? It's kind of just these two girls move out into the middle of nowhere with their father in the country while their mother's ill, and that's kind of the story, right? It's just kind of like a slice of life of what's going on, and then they meet Totoro, and he just kind of happens to be this magical guy that they go on these little adventures with. And, you know, for what it's worth, I think it's just a really relaxing story. And again, I think that's really what Miyazaki's going for. And there's a couple interviews I did go over with him where he does talk about it. But what do you guys think? Adam, what kind of, again, is that the vibe that you're getting? It's just very peaceful. And again, not traditional to maybe the movies that were coming out in the late 80s.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I feel like a lot of the Studio Ghibli movies kind of go down that same, just kind of slice of life. But this one's, no different, I think.
And again, I think the plot's very simple too. Wouldn't you agree with that? Where it's very just.
I think so.
It feels almost what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like almost like a fairy tale, but really no. I wouldn't say there's like a lesson really learned or anything like that. It's very just kind of happening. This movie.
I think that's probably what makes this movie so popular. Yeah, I think that's what makes this movie so popular. Is just because it's so easy to follow. It's just there's no complications. Just exists.
Right, and I think that's, again, what he's trying to go for, because a lot of this movie, and again, some of the interviews I did see, he wanted to counter the kind of the current culture at the time, where a lot of the culture was about the violence that was in media and, the action, and he wanted to bring something a little bit different to the table. And you can definitely tell, too, there's a lot of very personal storytelling in this movie. Miyazaki's mother, when he was giving interviews, he talked about she was very ill with a similar disease. I think she had tuberculosis as well. And, he was in a similar situation where his family had to move to the countryside, and they, she was in the hospital there, and then they were kind of living there, and she was getting better. But you could tell this was just a very deep personal story. Originally, they wanted him to do a male protagonist, but he said that would have been too hard for him emotionally to do, so he ended up switching it to two female protagonists so he could kind of distance himself from, the storytelling. Because, again, it was a very personal story. But I think that, again, that makes it all the more interesting. Because, again, there's not really much as far as modern. There's no technology in the movie. It's very pulled away. Now, John, do you think that's a good thing that they did with this story? Because, again, maybe people would find it harder to relate to, because it is set in modern time, but it almost doesn't feel like it at the same time.
No, I think it was a good way to do it. I thought it was interesting. The character, like Totoro, at first I thought, before coming even into this, I thought he was going to be one of those soft little Disney kind of characters per se, but he was kind of creepy in a way.
Yeah, I mean,
not as creepy as the cat bus.
Yeah, it's interesting with Miyazaki's art style, and I think we're going to see this kind of revealed throughout some of his other films. The characters that look the most innocent kind of have this almost rougher edge to them, especially when Totoro screams or yells. He has this big drastic mouth opening with these big ugly teeth that kind of stick out. It's not what you would expect, right? You see this kind of silhouette of this carefree guy, but at the same time he is kind of I guess you could argue a little bit creepy to some extent. Is it?
I like how it doesn't.
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I like how it doesn't intimidate them, though, especially May. When she first sees him, if you figure, I think she's 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I would scream and run away if I saw that giant beast, but she just jumps right on his belly, and doesn't care. He's, growling or screaming, and she does it back to him. I just love that. I don't know, that lack of fear, that fearlessness that comes with, I guess, childhood and, just embracing what's around you. I loved the girl characters and how they interacted with the environment. I thought it was really cute.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be pretty intimidated if I saw this giant gray furry creature just hanging out on the top of a tree.
Yeah, seriously. And just jumping on him, just poking him around. And the cat bus is pretty creepy looking at times, which ironically is not based on the Cheshire Cat. So a lot of people seem to think that he kind of drew inspiration. Just a coincidence, apparently, which, I guess take that for what it is. But I think, now, John, this is something more, I think, for you. So we've all watched Disney movies, but Disney's, John, for you has been the primary, vehicle for your animated films. Comparative to Disney films around this time always had a similar kind of plot. There was, it's like the Disney formula, if you will, like a princess finding something, overcoming something at the end, fighting a villain, throwing a villain away, and then ending a story living happily ever after. You don't get this in this kind of movie. And this movie, I think, is like almost counterculture to kind of the Disney formula. Do you think that's what makes it, that separates it vastly from the Disney films?
I think that's what makes it more unique in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like also like it's more culturally accepted, I guess I'd say.
Okay. Yeah, the cultural
Se,
difference. That's a good. That's interesting. You bring up the culture. Did you notice? Did you feel a lot of like cultural difference in this movie? Was there things that maybe you couldn't relate to culturally, or do you think this would speak to a wider audience?
No, I think it's got its little cultural unique things in it that make it more unique than per se some Disney movies are.
Okay. How about you, Adam? Do you think the culture, I think for the most part, I feel like the culture was kind of, I think it's widely acceptable. I don't think there was anything too culturally specific in this movie that kind of took me out of it or I couldn't relate to it. Do you think there was anything necessarily?
Yeah, I think that a lot of these movies, they tackle like, real life events and, things that would happen in real life as opposed to Disney movies, which, sometimes they do include that stuff, but it's definitely not to the extent of these, which is why I think that a lot of times the Studio Ghibli movies, they kind of like set their own standard, like
Right.
they're in a completely different category.
Yeah. No, I could agree with that. I feel like they are very grounded for the most part, and I think they want to tell just this very grounded story. And having the two young sisters, I think, is also definitely a big plus in this movie, where in a typical Disney movie, you would have like your almost surface level kind of emotions. But Julie, I even know when we were watching this movie, you were even saying like, this is like a really good depiction of just two sisters kind of hanging out. And I think the dub does play a lot into that. For the record, we all did watch this in the dubbed version of this film. I know there are differences between the sub, but for the sake of discussion, we're going to keep it limited. We're just going to be watching the dubbed version. But I think the dubs are pretty well done as far as these movies, especially the more recent ones. We're not talking about the ocean dubs, which that's a whole other discussion of things. But the one that's done, at least was done by Disney, I think is fantastic. And having actual sisters play each other as far as the dub, I think that was a really good job. And Julie, again, I know you pointed that out as well.
Yeah, I loved it. I love the fact that, of course, they were real sisters, the Fanning sisters, and then it even showed them, being in the same booth together, delivering their lines. So it just adds so much more authenticity to their performances. But even still, and this movie, of course, is two sisters, but I feel like you could apply it to any sibling relationship where you have an older sibling and a younger sibling, and the younger sibling's always following you around, copying the things you're doing, or, wants to put on the brave face. I think they really did an awesome job with that dynamic. And it really, you could see their joy together, and then you could see the frustration when, May is kind of throwing a little temper tantrum. And then, when it comes to a boiling point, it definitely, as simple as the story was, it definitely had some emotional beats as well that, really hit hard.
Yeah, I think towards the latter end of this movie, like really hits home for me when Satsuki's upset about the mom not being able to come home because the mom's in the hospital and she was supposed to come home to visit, but she has a fever and she can't come home. And you see kind of Satsuki just like break down with Granny, who's like the neighbor that takes care of them. She just really lets all these emotions out, saying, like, oh, she can't come home. Is she gonna die? And like, it felt very raw, and I feel like, especially for a Disney film, if we're comparing it, to what we get from modern America film, that feels almost kind of taboo. That seems something like that we wouldn't necessarily want to go into in American culture. But it's interesting to see that the Japanese culture is more than willing to explore some of these more, emotional stances that we wouldn't get typically in a film. And Adam, do you think that's like good? I think that's good for children to see sometimes. It feels like almost a more relatable tone here.
Yeah, I mean, it's, at least in this way, I think it's a nice segue. Like, it's kind of like you're still giving them that entertainment that they're looking for, I guess, but you're also segueing into these real life events, which, they're going to happen eventually at some point.
Right. And it's interesting because I think maybe Pixar's come the closest to this as far as, their storytelling, where they can elevate a story and give us something, which is funny because you see a lot of Ghibli references in Pixar movies. You can tell there's definitely an appreciation for the style that they go for in these films. Now, Totoro is something I think we should just talk about real quick. So Totoro doesn't come into this movie for a little bit. ironically. I think it's about 30 minutes almost before we actually see Totoro. A lot of this movie is just kind of set up, but I think Totoro, I think when they talked about it, I think one of the producers was talking with Hayao Miyazaki, and he said, Miyazaki was worried, like, oh, well, Totoro, when are we going to introduce him into the story? We should do it right away. It's about Totoro. We should do it right away. And he's like, no, you can wait. It's okay. He's like, E.T., for example. E.T. doesn't come into the movie until about 40 minutes or halfway through the movie. E.T. shows up. So let's kind of make Totoro the same way. He's kind of this magical being that kind of like enhances the story, isn't necessarily just what the story is about. And I think there's an interesting comparison there between E.T. and My Neighbor Totoro, almost, where they kind of have a similar thing where the character, they have their place in the story, but they're also there to help the children along with the struggles that they're going through. And again, Totoro is just wonderfully done. It's magical, it's fantasy. My question would be to everyone, do you think Totoro was actually there? Because I feel like that's a question that's in the movie, and there's a few times where I think you can make the case that he might have been just in the children's imagination, but at the same time, I'm curious, especially with the end. Let's go around real quick. So, Adam, what do you think? Was he really there?
Listen, if they got on that cat bus,
I know,
which clearly they did, I think Totoro is definitely there.
Yeah, and I think that's the one argument, right? I guess you'd have to make, because up until the cat bus at the end of the movie, I don't know. I think a case could have been made Totoro wasn't actually there. That's the one time.
I agree. If they didn't get on there, then I might have argued against. But yeah, I think he was there.
All right, Julie, you feel the same way?
We'll see. Another selling point for me, obviously the cat bus, but yeah, I think Totoro was there. I mean, definitely there was a couple times where I teetered, but even thinking about the soot sprites. And when they first see those in the beginning of the movie and they're talking, oh, what are they? And, Granny says, oh, yeah, you must have soot sprites here. She goes, I used to be able to see them when I was little. So I think like the soot sprites, Totoro and the cat bus are something that is kind of exclusive to the childhood experience because you are, pure. You don't have, the burden of adulthood on you. And you can see, things that might not be accessible to everyone because even there was that scene where I think Totoro comes, they see Totoro and he's doing the little dance to make the plants grow. And then the girls go out and join them. And you can see I like that shot. They're doing their dance. And then you can see the dad in his office kind of working away and he's completely oblivious to it. So, and I think if he were to turn, he would just see the girls doing the dance by themselves. But I think Totoro, because he's an adult, he doesn't have, that childlike wonder anymore.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, and they do kind of bring that up a couple times, as far as, if Totoro's really there or not. You have to believe, and that's kind of like a Disney thing too, right? That's kind of a common Disney trope where in order to see the magic, you have to believe in the magic, and that's pretty fun. And again, I think like Adam kind of said earlier, like kids are definitely going to latch on to those things, and they're also not going to know that they're learning these like incredible lessons the same way, which again, some of the most masterful animated films I think really do that well. John, how about you? What do you think? You think Totoro's real over there?
I think he's real. I also like what you guys were saying, though, too. Like, he's definitely one of those things that more children can see more. Like, I feel like a lot of these children's movies, children can take way more out of these than we can because they see things in a completely different vision than we do. Like, if you watch, like, you can see when children watch a movie for like the first time and they get so much more out of it than you got the first time you've ever saw it because they're completely immersed in this world. And I feel like when they make these movies, especially this one, I feel like it connects deeply with children in a way.
Right, and I think that's a big thing that Miyazaki, I think, was going for in this movie. I think that the main thing too is just like the beauty of Japan. He really wanted to capture that, which is undeniable. The settings, the landscapes in this movie, they look like they were made today. A lot of them. I think the animation just doesn't miss a beat throughout this entire movie. And then once we see Totoro introduced and the strange things kind of start happening, it really does feel like a really engrossing fantasy, almost like kind of like what John said, like a child seeing it for the first time. It's kind of what we would see, but a little warped, right? A little fantastical, a little magical. Sure, why not a giant cat bus picking them up at the corner when, it looks like these two big eyes peering, and then the one time they do see the bus, they see just a regular bus, but then when the cat bus comes, you see it's a cat bus. Like, why not, right? Again, it kind of makes sense in a weird way, especially from a child's perspective, and I think they did a really phenomenal job with that. Miyazaki really can capture the spirit of a film like no other director. And, that's just going to continue on with his storied career, which as we start to review his movies. The one final thing I want to talk about, and then we're going to wrap up with our scores here. I don't know about you guys, but my only nitpick I think I really have with this movie, and this is going to be with a lot of Miyazaki movies, so I'm going to sound like a broken record as we're going to be going through this. I don't know about the ending. The ending to me feels like the movie just stops. Right, I feel like Miyazaki said, I told my story, and then, oh, hey, I'm done talking. And then there's a bunch of little scenes in the credits. And I know the credits do show kind of what happens after the movie, and that's something Miyazaki likes to do. How do we all feel about that? Because to me, I don't necessarily hate it, but I don't know if I necessarily love it at the same time. Adam, what do you think? Was that something... I just feels like the movie just stops.
Yeah, I agree. It just leaves me wanting more. I want to see what happens. I don't know, give me a couple days worth, what happens afterwards.
Right.
I just want to see some sort of resolution, I guess.
Right, and do you feel like that has something to do with the very simple nature of the actual plot of this movie, where it's almost like we're kind of getting that just slice of life, that living in the moment of something that happened with these kids, and it's almost like it's not a complete narrative at times.
My guess is that they're probably going for, leave it up to your imagination. What do you think happened? This way, anybody can make up whatever kind of ending they want.
Right. And it's interesting because I could see that, but then Miyazaki also shows images of what happened afterwards, because we see the kids, the mom does actually end up coming home. You see Mai and her sister, with her, reading a storybook, which they're actually reading Totoro, which is about the trolls, which I think that's really interesting. So again, some of that story there, he might not be real, but you know what I mean? It's interesting. I don't know how I feel about it. Again, it doesn't ruin the movie for me by any means, but I felt like I was more jarred by it than I remember previously being, where it's just oh, hey, we're done. Oh, okay. Bye movie.
Maybe it's a way to get you to watch the credits.
Yeah, I mean, it worked. I did sit through the whole credits, so
yeah.
I'll give you that. John, how about you? What did you think of that? Were you were you unsatisfied with I wouldn't say I was unsatisfied, but did you find it just kind of abrupt the way the movie stops?
Yeah, I felt like it was weird. It was one of those things where almost how they put out a movie and that there's going to be a second part to it, and it kind of just ends at a certain part. I feel like this movie kind of ended like that. But also I don't like the way movies always do, where they started to do where after the credits they have more stuff that you have to sit through. Mm-hmm. I feel like they should just incorporate it into the whole story, right, which makes it more, I feel like, a complete story then.
Right, and I think it can add that. I think some viewers, I don't think anyone's going to necessarily hate the movie because of it, but I think you will be just kind of taken back by it. Kids might not even notice it for the most part. They'll just be like, oh, yay, everyone's happy now, and, Totoro technically saved the day. I think it's really going to be the adult viewers that'll probably be more oh, I guess we're done here. Cool. Julie, what do you think?
I want to say it didn't bother me that much. I feel like in other movies, I felt it more, that kind of rush to the end. But I will say it is a bit jarring because you're going through this heightened emotional climax where May is missing, which was really stressful to me. They think she might have drowned at one point.
Yeah.
And then eventually the sisters reunite, and then they hop in the cat bus and they go see mom, and then they're laughing in the tree, and then it's over. So I think it was not so much that it ended. I think it was that contrast between that really heightened emotional state and then that really sharp come down and we're back and we're good.
Yeah, I think there is, there's a conversation to be had there. But overall, maybe that's kind of what Miyazaki was going for. Again, just trying to capture that essence of that slice of life. Anything can happen in a moment. I guess that's really kind of what he was going for. And I think that's really why this movie excels.
I do appreciate that.
Yeah, no. And I think
especially because if you think about it, life doesn't, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No.
Life doesn't just end when the movie ends. You know what I mean? This is just going to be the stopping point. and then get that little like those little tidbits during the credits. But this is the story I wanted to tell, and of course, things are going to continue on, but this is the end for me.
No, and I think so. And again, Miyazaki knew what he was doing because this movie just is absolutely phenomenal, which I think brings us to our final scores. I'm going to give My Neighbor Totoro a 10 out of 10. I would make the argument here that this might be one of Miyazaki's best films, just because I think he's able to show what he can do with just this very simple story. I think anyone of any age can follow this, whether it's subbed or dubbed or whatever the case is. Young kids are going to find something really special here. Adults are going to find something really special here. It's nice when I can watch a movie and not have to have like a degree to psychoanalyze what I'm watching. I can just kind of like let my mind go and have a really great time. There's a reason everyone remembers Totoro, and there's a reason why Totoro is the mascot of Studio Ghibli. It's incredibly memorable. I think this whole movie is memorable, and it kind of is the bar that I compare a lot of the movies that come after it as far as what Studio Ghibli puts out. It's interesting to note that we didn't review it, but Grave of the Fireflies was actually a co-release with this movie. If you've never seen Grave of the Fireflies, it's incredibly depressing, and it'll suck the soul right out of you. They were played back to back. A lot of people would see Totoro and then skip Grave of the Fireflies because they heard how terrible it was. Or I think it was either vice versa. I know they were played in different orders when you would watch them. But just imagine that culture shock going from incredibly depressing to incredibly peaceful and happy. But Totoro just makes you feel happy. I think it's an incredibly phenomenal job. The animation's superior to most things we get today, even especially on the CGI front. I think this hand-drawn style just stands out among everything. I think the characters are all memorable. I'll remember Totoro, and I can't recommend it enough to everybody. Show your kids, show your family, show somebody who's never seen an anime. I think this is the one that you really should watch. Adam, how about you? What do you think?
Listen, man, I told you this is like the 5th time I've seen this movie, and because of that, I am also going to give My Neighbor Totoro a 10 out of 10. I love this film. I'll watch it again at any point. And I think that because it's such a good gateway into like anime, that it deserves that 10 out of 10 score.
All right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a reason why a lot of people who are familiar and unfamiliar with anime come back to this movie. And it just stands why Totoro is so fantastic. All right, John, how about you? What do you think?
Well, let's get down to like realism here. We're not going 10 out of 10 here. But I'll give this a solid 8.
Who are you? A great big soot gremlin?
I thought it was a good movie. Definitely a good time. Didn't blow me away, but it was definitely, I can see a good start to an anime.
All right, so you're starting to see the early beginnings of Studio Ghibli there. You think you're starting to gain maybe a little bit of appreciation for what they're putting out?
Yeah, I'm liking a little bit what they're putting out.
Okay, very interesting. All right, so John's softening up. That's more than I thought I would get, so I'm actually pretty proud of that. All right, Julie, how about you? What do you think?
I'm going to be giving My Neighbor Totoro a 10 out of 10 as well. I've been teetering on my scores, like thinking leading up to this. In my mind, I knew like what I thought my favorite Studio Ghibli movie was, and I think it's already changed. There's a reason that this movie is the cornerstone for the animation company. The animation alone is just beautiful. It's very cozy. That's the word I was looking for earlier. Mm-hmm. Just makes you like want to wrap up in a warm blanket. And just the story is so simple and pure. The sibling dynamic was amazing. And of course, what's not to love about Totoro? So I'm very excited to continue, this trip down, memory lane with Ghibli.
Yeah, I mean, Hayao Miyazaki, is a guy he just won't quit. And he retired like 10 times at this point. He's coming back for another movie. It's the running joke, I think, of like the anime and the animation industry. He's the Japan Walt Disney, essentially. And I think this was a very interesting start to what we're going to see going forward. And we're going to see his style not necessarily evolve, but I think just kind of change slightly and his vision kind of expand more. And I just really can't wait to talk it with you guys, because anime will continue on in the next video. We'll catch you guys next time. If you guys like what you've seen here today, consider giving this video a like and leaving your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay up to date with everything Real Movie Guys related, make sure to hit that subscribe button and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't forget, all you audio listeners at home, we are available on many podcasting platforms. Just search The Real Movie Guys, you should pop right up. Thank you again all so much for joining us on this episode of The Real Review. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. Catch you next time.